I'm Amber, 28 years old, from Huntington Beach, California. I was thrilled when my family threw me a graduation party after I finally earned my degree in business administration. But as I walked into the living room, the banner hanging across the wall hit me like a slap. "Congratulations, loser." My parents burst out laughing, calling it a harmless prank. Then they brought out the cake box. I opened it and the icing spelled out the same thing. "Congratulations, loser." More laughter erupted, my dad chuckling hard, my mom giggling behind her hand, my sister smirking from the corner. I didn't join in. Instead, I laughed out loud, a sharp, forced burst that made the room go quiet. Everyone started shaking eyes wide, waiting for my reaction. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and headed for the door. But not before doing this one thing that would change everything. They called me in a panic 3 weeks later because... Before I dive deeper into my story, I'd love to hear what time it is where you're listening and which city you're in. It's amazing to see how far these real-life tales travel. The party was set up in our living room with blue and gold streamers draped from the ceiling and balloons clustered in the corners. A big banner stretched across the wall that read, "Congrats, Amber." It felt like they had actually put effort into it for once, real decorations, instead of just throwing something together last minute. People were there too. Family members, a few neighbors from our Huntington Beach block, even some of Dad's co-workers from the construction site. Food was laid out properly on the table, fresh salads and grilled burgers, not the usual takeout boxes. I had never seen them go this far for me. They had for Brittany, though. When she started that little art class in high school and won some minor award, they threw a whole barbecue, invited her friends, even got her a new sketch pad set. And when she dropped out of community college after one semester, no one batted an eye, no lectures, just encouragement to try again. My mom came over first, wrapping me in a hug that felt warmer than usual. "We're so proud of you, honey," she said, her voice soft but with that edge I knew too well. "You've always been the strong one, you know. You didn't need as much hand-holding as Brittany did." It was her way of defending it, I guess, like she felt a hint of guilt but pushed it down by reminding herself I was okay on my own. I blinked, trying to process it, years of feeling like I was just the reliable kid who didn't deserve the fuss. But today, maybe it was different. Dad slapped my back next, chuckling a bit. "First in the family to finish college, eh? Good job, kid." He avoided looking me straight in the eye, like he knew there were old issues bubbling under but didn't want to stir them up. Typical of him, always playing the peacekeeper without actually fixing anything. Brittany was off to the side, fiddling with her phone as usual, not even glancing up much. She looked a little uncomfortable when she saw me, noticing, shifting her weight like she wasn't sure how to act. Someone handed me a drink, and there was a toast from a cousin, people coming up to shake my hand, asking about my job prospects in business admin. I was starting to float on it, letting myself believe this was real pride. Then they wheeled out the cake, a big layered thing that looked custom ordered, not some store-bought sheet. Mom carried it in with a smile, setting it down in front of me. Dad nodded, still grinning. "Go on, check it out," he said. I leaned in, still caught in the moment, but when I read the icing, my stomach dropped. "Congratulations, loser." It was right there in bold letters. At first I thought it was a mix-up, some bakery error. But then the laughter kicked in. Dad started it, a low chuckle that built into a full belly laugh like it was the funniest thing ever. Mom tried to hide her giggle, covering her mouth, but she couldn't stop. "Oh, come on, Amber, it's just a joke," she said, her tone defensive again, like she sensed my reaction but wanted to brush it off. Brittany smirked too, but there was a flicker of bourgeois in her eyes, like she wasn't fully on board, but went along anyway. I scanned the room, a few guests shifting awkwardly, exchanging glances, but no one spoke up. That's when I spotted it. A smaller banner tucked in the corner, one I hadn't noticed before. "Congrats, failure." It was like a double punch, the cake and the banner hitting at once. Something inside me snapped, but not in anger or tears. It was clearer than that. I picked up my glass, raised it slowly, and the room hushed a bit, everyone watching. I forced a laugh out loud, loud and sharp, echoing off the walls. It made them all freeze, eyes widening, bodies tensing like they were shaking inside. To the family, I said, my voice steady, for always being exactly who I thought you were. The laughter died completely. I nodded at the decorations, the cake, the banner. So much effort into this, I'll never forget it. The silence stretched, Mom fidgeting, her guilt showing more now as she glanced at Dad. He cleared his throat, trying to play it off. Amber, don't take it so seriously, it's just... But I cut in, lifting the glass higher. And to the future, because I've finally learned how to treat you the way you've always treated me. No one said a word. I held their stares for a moment, letting the tension build, the unease sink in. Then I downed the drink in one gulp, set the glass down with a deliberate clink, and turned for the door. Brittany watched me now, her smirk gone, replaced by that bois roi look again, like she knew something was off but couldn't place it. Dad tried one last time. Come on, kid, stay. It's your party. I paused at the threshold, smirking back. Oh, and one more thing. You'll figure it out soon enough. As I walked out, the silence followed me, thick and heavy. No yelling, no scene, just that lingering shake in the air. They probably tried to laugh it off after I left, telling themselves I was overreacting, that I'd come around. But they had no idea what was coming. For years, I had been the one they relied on, the strong one who didn't need attention. Brittany got the praise, the second chances, the support. When she flunked out of her first attempt at beauty school, they paid for her to try again. No questions. Me, I worked 2 jobs through college, paid my own way with loans and scholarships, never asked for a dime. And now this joke. It was the final confirmation. I wasn't angry in the hot, exploding way. It was colder, sharper. I got in my car, pulled out my phone, and made the first move. But that was just the start. The real consequences would unfold over the next 3 weeks, and by then they'd be the ones shaking for real. In that moment, as I drove away from our Huntington Beach home, the ocean breeze coming through the window, I felt a shift. All those times I swallowed the pain, told myself it didn't matter. It did. And now they were about to learn what it felt like to be on the receiving end. The party wasn't the end. It was the beginning of me finally standing up. Driving away from that party in Huntington Beach, the ocean air hitting my face through the open window, I couldn't stop thinking about how I'd let myself believe they were proud of me. That banner, that cake, it wasn't just a prank. It was a reminder of where I stood in my family's eyes. All those years of being the invisible one came rushing back, and it wasn't just a vague feeling anymore. It was sharp-cutting, like a truth I'd been dodging my whole life. When I was 6, I came home from a school science fair, clutching a first-place ribbon for my little volcano project. I was beaming, waiting for Mom or Dad to say something, anything. Brittany, 4 at the time, had scribbled some colorful shapes on paper. Mom gushed over it, pinned it to the fridge, called her our little Picasso. Dad ruffled her hair, said she'd be an artist someday. I held out my ribbon, hopeful. Dad glanced at it, shrugged. Science fairs are cute, Amber, but they're not a big deal. Mom gave me a quick smile, distracted, like she was already thinking about Brittany's next masterpiece. That's nice, honey, she said. Just don't get too full of yourself. I wasn't trying to brag, I just wanted them to see me. By 10, I stopped expecting anything. Brittany got in trouble at school for skipping class, and Mom brushed it off. She's just creative, needs her space. If I forgot to do one chore, I was irresponsible. When Brittany got a C in art, Dad said it was the teacher's fault. My straight A's, barely a nod. My Aunt Jessica saw it all. She'd come over for holiday dinners, watch Brittany get praised for nothing while I was ignored. Once, when I was 12, she pulled Mom aside in the kitchen. I overheard her through the door. You're favoring Brittany too much. Samantha, she said, voice firm. It's going to hurt Amber, and you need to be fair. Mom laughed it off, defensive. Amber's fine, Jessica. She's strong, doesn't need the same attention. Aunt Jessica didn't push, but she looked at me later that night, her eyes saying she knew it wasn't right. That was the first time I realized someone else saw it too, but it didn't change anything. High school was more of the same. I worked my butt off, got into UC Irvine on a scholarship, paid my own way with part-time jobs and loans. Brittany tried community college, flunked out after one semester, and mom and dad didn't even blink. She'll figure it out, they said, handing her money for clothes, art supplies, whatever she wanted. They paid her tuition up front, no questions asked, while I was scraping by on tips from waitressing. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was stronger for it. But deep down, it stung every time they celebrated her failures like they were victories. The worst part came when I was 22, still in college. I'd been saving up, putting aside $5,000 from my jobs for a used car to get to campus easier. One day, I checked my joint savings account. Mom had access because I trusted her. It was empty. I confronted her, heart pounding. She didn't even look guilty, just shrugged. "We needed it for Brittany's new car," she said, like it was obvious. "You're doing fine, Amber. You don't need it as much as she does." Brittany was there when Mom said it, shifting uncomfortably, her eyes darting away. "I didn't know they took your money," she mumbled, but she didn't give the car back or say no to it. She just accepted it like always. That was when I knew. She wasn't clueless. She saw the favoritism, felt a little bad maybe, but she never pushed back because it worked for her. Aunt Jessica heard about it later, called me up. "I told them years ago this would happen," she said, her voice tight. "They didn't listen, Amber. They think you're so strong you don't need them, but that's no excuse." Her words stuck with me, validation that I wasn't imagining it, that this wasn't just in my head. But it didn't fix the hole it left. I kept going. Graduated with honors, landed a job in business admin, all on my own. Brittany. She tried starting a nail salon last year, used mom and dad's money, and when it tanked, they didn't care. They co-signed her loans, paid her rent, while I was the one they called when they needed help with bills. I did it. Paid their utilities, covered small debts. Because I thought that's what family did. I even co-signed a loan for Brittany's next big idea. A new salon, $10,000, thinking maybe this time they'd see me as more than the strong one. But that night at the party with the cake and the banner laughing in my face, it hit me. They didn't just overlook me. They didn't care. All those years of swallowing it, hoping one day they'd be proud, were a waste. Mom's defensive, "You're strong" excuse, Dad's half-hearted peacekeeping, Brittany's bourgeois glances that never led to action. It was all the same pattern. Aunt Jessica's warning from years ago echoed in my head louder than ever. They'd pushed me too far, and that betrayal, that $5,000 they took without asking, was the final straw. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was done. As I sat in my car that night, the ocean waves crashing in the distance, I knew what I had to do. They thought I'd always be there, the reliable one to clean up their messes. But they were wrong. And they were about to find out just how wrong. That realization in the car after the party didn't fade. It grew, turning into a plan as I drove through Huntington Beach, the streetlights flickering past. I wasn't going to explode or confront them right then. That would give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I decided to pull back in stages, starting small, letting them feel the absence bit by bit. For years, I'd been their quiet safety net, sending money every month to cover little things. Utility bills when they were short a couple hundred for Dad's truck repair, even chipping in for Mom's medical copays. It added up. But I did it without fanfare, thinking it was my role as the strong one. No more. Week 1, I stopped it all. No transfer to Mom's account, no Venmo for the electric bill they'd mentioned last month. I didn't warn them, didn't send a text explaining. Just silence on my end. The first call came 2 days after the party. Mom's number lit up my phone while I was at work staring at spreadsheets in my business admin job. I let it ring, my thumb hovering over the screen. The voicemail popped up a minute later. "Amber, honey, it's Mom. Something's up with the bill payment. Did you forget? Call me back, okay? I know you're strong, but we could use the help." There was that vulnerability in her voice, a slight crack. like she was admitting she needed me but didn't want to say it outright. I deleted it. Didn't reply. It felt strange at first not jumping to fix it, but then a wave of relief hit. For once, I wasn't the one holding everything together. Dad tried next to text that evening. "Hey, kid. Mom said the bills are late. You okay? Let's talk." He was doing his peacekeeper thing, avoiding the real issue from the party, like if he ignored it, we'd all pretend it didn't happen. But it was half-hearted, no follow-up call, just that message hanging there. I read it, felt a twinge of the old guilt, but pushed it down. No response from me. Brittany didn't reach out that week, probably assuming Mom and Dad had it handled, or maybe she was too wrapped up in her own stuff to notice yet. I imagined her at home scrolling through her phone, not realizing the support she'd indirectly benefited from was gone. As the days went on, I replayed more moments in my head, fueling my resolve. Like the time last year when Brittany's first nail salon idea flopped after 3 months. She'd spent the startup money on supplies and rent, but customers didn't come. Mom and Dad didn't scold her. They hugged her, said, "It's okay, you'll get it next time," and started planning how to fund round 2. I was the one they asked to co-sign the loan for her new attempt, $10,000 from the bank. "You're good with money, Amber." Dad had said, his tone casual, like it was no big deal. "It won't affect you." I said yes back then, out of habit, but now that cosign was still active, hanging over me. Week 1 was just the start. Stopping the monthly help was testing the waters, seeing how they'd react without me as the fallback. By the end of the week, another voicemail from Mom, her voice a bit shakier. "Amber, the power company called. We need that payment. Please call me. I thought you were okay after the party. It was just a joke, you know." There was the guilt peeking through her defensive tone, mixed with a hint of worry, like she was starting to sense something bigger. Dad followed with a call that night, his message gruff but trying to keep peace. "Amber, what's going on? Mom's upset. We can talk about the party if that's it. Just fix the bill thing, yeah?" He didn't apologize, didn't address the banner or the cake directly, just skirted around it as always. I listened, then deleted. No reply. It was liberating, that silence. For the first time, I wasn't the one smoothing things over, apologizing for their mistakes. They were feeling the pinch, and it was only week 1. I spent that weekend alone in my apartment near the beach, walking the sand, thinking about how long I'd carried them. The monthly supports weren't huge, a few hundred here and there, but over time it was thousands I'd given without thanks. And now stopping it cold without warning was my way of saying enough. They probably told themselves I was busy or upset, but would come around. Brittany might have asked Mom about it, her boy Roy growing, if she pieced together that my money had been part of her safety net. But I didn't care. The relief grew stronger each day I didn't respond. It was like shedding a weight I didn't know was so heavy. As week 1 ended, a final text from Dad popped up. "Amber, call us. This isn't like you." He was right. It wasn't. But that's exactly why it felt so good. They were starting to shake, just like at the party, and they had no idea the real pullback was coming. Week 2 would bring the warning, and if they didn't change, which I knew they wouldn't, week 3 would seal it. For now, though, ignoring those calls, feeling the space I'd created was enough to keep me going. They thought I was still the reliable Amber. They were wrong, and the consequences were just beginning. A week after I stopped the monthly payments, I decided it was time for the next step. I wasn't ready to let them off the hook, not after that party, and all those years of being the invisible one. So in week 2, I sent a single text to Mom, Dad, and Brittany. Short and clear. "I'm considering pulling my cosign from Brittany's loan for the new nail salon. Change how you treat me, or it's gone." It was $10,000 on the line, their big plan for Brittany's second shot at her dream. I knew they wouldn't take it seriously. They never did when it came to me. No reply came that day, just silence, like they thought I was bluffing or would cave, as always. By the end of week 2, Mom called, her voicemail less soft than before. "Amber, what's this about the loan? We're counting on it for Brittany. You're so strong, honey. You don't need to do this over a silly party joke. That defensive guilt was there again, her way of admitting fault without owning it, like she thought calling me strong would make it okay. I didn't call back. Dad texted next, still trying to keep peace. Kid, let's not make this a big deal. Talk to us, we'll sort it out. He avoided mentioning the favoritism, the banner, the cake, as if ignoring it would erase the past. Brittany sent a message too, her tone shaky. Sis, I need that loan. I didn't know Mom took your savings for my car, I swear. Don't pull it, please. Her bourgeois was real, but she didn't apologize or push back against Mom and Dad's choices. She just wanted the money to keep flowing. I waited, gave them a chance to show anything different. They didn't. So in week 3, I made the call to the bank from my office, my voice steady as I removed my name from Brittany's loan. It was done in 10 minutes, no drama, just a simple form. The loan collapsed without my credit backing it, and Brittany's salon plan was dead. That's when the calls exploded. Dad got through first, his voice low, more honest than I'd ever heard. Amber, can you come home and talk? I know I screwed up letting things get unfair. I should have stepped in. Please don't do this to Brittany. It was the closest he'd come to admitting he'd failed as a peacekeeper, but it was still about her, not me. I let him talk, his words piling up, then replied coolly. Dad, I'm just treating you the way you've treated me. I hung up before he could respond. Mom was next, her call an hour later, voice cracking with that mix of guilt and defense. Amber, why are you doing this? I thought you were stronger than Brittany. She needs this more than you. That party was a mistake, okay? She couldn't say sorry outright, just leaned on the same excuse that I was fine without their support. I cut her off. Mom, a mistake is forgetting a birthday. This was a choice. All of it. I ended the call, my heart racing but steady. Brittany's call came late that night, her voice desperate. Amber, the bank called. The loan's gone, my salon's done. I didn't mean for any of this. I didn't know about your money until you said it. I need you, sis, please. Her conflict was clear, that flicker of guilt for benefiting from their favoritism, but she still expected me to fix it, to fall back into being the reliable one. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling of my apartment, the ocean breeze drifting in. Brittany, I said, my voice calm but cold, you'll figure it out just like I had to. That's how it works when you're not the favorite. I hung up, her plea cut off mid-sentence. That was the last time I spoke to any of them. They kept calling, leaving voicemails. I didn't open texts I didn't read. The panic was real now. Brittany's dream was dead, her apartment lease at risk without the loan, and Mom and Dad scrambling to cover their own bills without my help. They were feeling the consequences, and I wasn't going to soften it. For years they'd leaned on me, mocked me, taken me for granted. Now they were out of chances, and I was out of patience. The line was drawn, and I wasn't stepping back over it. The day after I hung up on Brittany, I sat in my Huntington Beach apartment, the morning light filtering through the blinds and blocked their numbers. Mom's, Dad's, Brittany's. My finger didn't shake as I tapped each contact, sealing them out. The silence that followed was like a deep breath I'd been holding in for years. No more voicemails pleading for help. No more texts trying to pull me back into their chaos. It wasn't anger driving me anymore, or even pain. It was clarity, pure and sharp, that I didn't owe them my life. They didn't let go quietly. About a week later, a letter showed up at my door, Dad's handwriting scrawled across the envelope. Amber, I messed up, letting things get so unfair. Brittany's back home. No salon, no place to rent. I tried to keep peace, but I failed you. Can you come talk? It was raw, the most honest he'd been, admitting his peacekeeping didn't work, but it was still about saving Brittany, not fixing what they'd done to me. Mom added a note. You're so strong, honey, but we're struggling. Brittany didn't mean to take so much. Her guilt was there, less defensive now, but she still couldn't say the word sorry. Brittany emailed, blocked from texting, sis. I'm stuck with Mom and Dad, no job, nothing. I didn't know they took your savings. I feel awful. Can we fix this? Her desperation was clear, that boy roi from the party now a full-on plea, but she wasn't offering to change, just asking me to step back into the old role. I read it all, let the words sit for a moment, then tore up the letter and deleted the email. No reply. They were out of options now. Brittany, 24, was back in their spare bedroom picking up shifts at a local surf shop, her salon dreams dead without my cosign. A cousin texted me saying the house was tense. Brittany snapping at mom and dad, wrestling with the guilt of benefiting from their favoritism, but not enough to act on it. Mom and dad were stretched thin, dad's truck payments overdue, mom's medical bills stacking up without my monthly help. They tried one last time, pulling into my office parking lot 2 weeks later. I saw dad's truck from my window, mom in the front, Brittany slouched in the back, looking lost. I didn't go out. I called security, watched them leave, and felt nothing but relief. That month, I took a new job in Irvine, California, a step up in business admin with better pay. I packed my things, left Huntington Beach, and settled into a small apartment on a quiet street lined with orange trees. Friends I'd drifted from stepped in, inviting me to barbecues, movie nights, walks through Irvine's parks. They became my family, the kind that didn't ask for my worth in dollars or favors. Aunt Jessica called, once her voice steady. I told them they'd lose you, Amber. You did what was right. I thanked her, but kept her at arm's length. This new life was mine, no strings to the past. Brittany never got her salon off the ground. Last I heard, she's still at home, stuck, her internal conflict growing as she faces a future without my support. Mom and dad burned through what little they had, no longer cushioned by my help. They sent a few more letters, left messages through friends, but I didn't respond. The cutoff was complete, not out of spite, but because I saw my value didn't depend on their approval. That party, the cake, the banner, was the push I needed to stop being their crutch. I'd spent years holding them up only to be laughed at. Now I was free. This whole thing taught me something I want to share. Family isn't always the safe haven we're told it is. Sometimes the people closest to you hurt you most through favoritism, neglect, or expecting you to carry their burdens. My biggest lesson was this: you have to set boundaries to protect your peace, even with family. Self-reliance means knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone make you feel less. For me, that meant saying no, cutting contact, and building a life that lifts me up. I'm in Irvine now, surrounded by people who value me for me, not what I can give. That's what freedom looks like. This story's value for you is in spotting the signs of a toxic family early. Favoritism, like praising one sibling while dismissing another. Neglect, like ignoring your wins. Or taking you for granted, like using your money without asking. If you see those red flags, act fast. Say no to unfair demands, seek support from friends or mentors, and prioritize your mental health. Don't wait for a moment like my party to realize you're worth more. My advice: write down what you need from relationships, and if family can't meet, that it's okay to walk away. You're not alone, and you're enough. I'm sharing this to help you avoid the years I spent hoping for change that never came. If this resonates, take it as a wake-up call. Set those limits now before you're drained. Thank you for listening to my story. If it hit home, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with your thoughts or your own experiences. I'd love to know how you've navigated moments like this.
You need to make these numbers work, Natalie. Investor confidence depends on it, my boss Brent Douglas said, sliding a folder across his mahogany desk. The fluorescent lights in his corner office buzzed overhead as I stared at the quarterly reports spread before me. My name is Natalie Serrano, and I had been a senior accountant at Glenforge Innovations here in Denver for 6 years. At 34, I thought I had seen everything in the corporate world, but nothing prepared me for what Brent was asking me to do that gray October afternoon. The company specialized in renewable energy consulting, and our reputation had been built on integrity and transparency. At least, that's what I believed until that moment. I don't understand what you mean by make them work, I said carefully, though the knot in my stomach told me I understood perfectly. The quarterly figures showed a significant loss in the third quarter, primarily due to 3 major contracts falling through and unexpected equipment failures at our wind farm projects. Brent leaned back in his leather chair, his expensive suit perfectly pressed despite the late hour. Come on, Natalie. You've been here long enough to know how these things go. We need to show growth, not decline. Our investors are expecting a 15% increase, and these numbers... He gestured dismissively at the reports. These won't cut it. I felt my heart race as I looked at the actual figures again. We were showing a 12% loss, not the 15% gain he wanted reported. Brent, these are the real numbers. I've triple-checked everything. The Westmont contract fell through in September, and the Colorado Springs project had those turbine issues that cost us nearly $2 million. Then find a way to reclassify those expenses, he said, his tone growing sharper. Move them to next quarter. Adjust the depreciation schedules. Do whatever you need to do. I don't care how you fix it, just fix it. The office felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in around me. Outside his window, I could see the Rocky Mountains in the distance, their peaks dusted with early snow. Those mountains had always reminded me why I loved working in Denver, but now they seemed like silent witnesses to what felt like a betrayal of everything I stood for. I can't do that, I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. That would be fraudulent reporting. I could lose my license. Brent's expression darkened, and I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. It wasn't surprise or disappointment. It was anger that I had dared to question him. That look told me this conversation was far from over. The tension in Brent's office was suffocating as he stared at me with barely concealed fury. I had worked for him for 3 years since he became the chief financial officer, and I thought I knew him well. He had always been demanding and results-oriented, but I had never seen this calculating coldness before. Natalie, I think you're misunderstanding the situation here, he said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. This isn't about fraud. This is about presenting our financial position in the most favorable light possible. It's what every company does. I shifted in my chair, feeling the weight of 6 years at Glenforge Innovations pressing down on me. I had started here as a junior accountant fresh out of graduate school, working my way up through dedication and long hours. I had genuinely believed in the company's mission of advancing renewable energy solutions. The irony wasn't lost on me that the company promoting clean energy was asking me to dirty their books. But these adjustments you're suggesting would misrepresent our actual financial position, I insisted. Moving expenses between quarters, manipulating depreciation schedules, that's not presenting things favorably, that's falsifying records. Brent stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the Denver skyline. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across his office, and I noticed how the light seemed to avoid his face. You know, Natalie, I've been watching your work for a while now. You're technically competent, I'll give you that, but you lack the vision to see the bigger picture. The bigger picture? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear his answer. He turned back to me, his smile sharp and cold. The bigger picture is that Glenforge Innovations is on the verge of securing a $100 million investment from Peterson Capital. That investment will allow us to expand our operations, hire more people, and make a real impact on renewable energy adoption. But if we show a loss this quarter, Peterson walks away. I felt my mouth go dry. Peterson Capital was one of the largest green energy investment firms in the country. A partnership with them would indeed transform Glenforge Innovations, but not at the cost of financial fraud. That doesn't justify falsifying our reports, I said, though my voice sounded smaller than I intended. Brent's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. Think about it over the weekend, Natalie. Think about what's more important, your rigid interpretation of accounting principles, or the future of clean energy. We'll talk again on Monday. As I left his office, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. That weekend was the longest of my life. I sat in my apartment in the Highlands neighborhood, staring out at the city lights and wrestling with what Brent had asked me to do. My cat Phoenix seemed to sense my distress and stayed close, purring softly as I tried to make sense of the situation. I kept thinking about my father, Miguel, who had immigrated from Mexico with nothing but a fierce work ethic and an unwavering belief in doing the right thing. He had worked construction for 30 years, sending me to college with money earned through back-breaking labor and absolute honesty. "Mija," he used to tell me, "your reputation is the only thing no one can take from you unless you give it away." On Sunday evening, I made my decision. I would not falsify the reports, no matter what Brent threatened. But something in his demeanor on Friday had made me uneasy, so I decided to protect myself. I drove back to the office building, using my access card to enter after hours. The building was eerily quiet as I made my way to my cubicle on the 14th floor. For the next 3 hours, I methodically copied every document I could access related to our quarterly financials. Emails, spreadsheets, internal memos, budget projections, everything. I encrypted the files and stored them on multiple external drives, then uploaded copies to a secure cloud storage account I created specifically for this purpose. Call it insurance, call it paranoia, but my instincts told me I would need proof of the company's actual financial position if things went badly. Monday morning arrived with a gray Denver sky that matched my mood. I dressed carefully in my navy blue suit, professional armor for what I suspected would be a battle. As I walked into the building, I noticed Brent's Porsche was already in the executive parking garage. He was clearly eager for our conversation. I had barely settled at my desk when his assistant, Victoria, appeared beside my cubicle. "Mr. Douglas wants to see you immediately," she said, her usually friendly demeanor replaced by cold professionalism. The way she said it, without her usual smile or small talk, told me that word of Friday's conversation had spread. As I walked toward Brent's office, I felt my colleagues' eyes on me. Some looked curious, others sympathetic, but most seemed eager to avoid being associated with whatever was happening. I had worked with these people for years, shared coffee breaks and celebrated promotions together, but now I felt completely alone. Brent's door was open, and I could see him sitting behind his desk with what looked like a prepared folder in front of him. His expression was calm, almost serene, which somehow made the situation feel more ominous than if he had been obviously angry. "Come in, Natalie," he said, his voice carrying an odd formality. "Close the door behind you. We have some things to discuss." I closed the door and took the chair across from Brent's desk, the same chair where I had sat on Friday when this nightmare began. The folder in front of him was labeled with my name, and I could see what looked like official letterhead beneath the cover. "I hope you used the weekend to reconsider our conversation," Brent said, folding his hands on his desk. His tone was casual, but there was steel underneath it. "Have you thought about what I asked you to do?" "I have," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I can't do what you're asking. I won't falsify financial reports, Brent. There has to be another way to handle the Peterson Capital situation." His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "I see. Well, that's unfortunate, but not entirely unexpected." He opened the folder and slid a document across the desk to me. "In that case, I'm afraid we need to discuss your future here at Glen Forge Innovations." My heart sank as I looked at the document. It was a termination letter, already prepared and dated for today. The reason given was performance issues and failure to adapt to evolving business requirements. I felt a surge of anger at the vague language designed to protect the company from any wrongful termination claims. "Performance issues?" I said, unable to keep the indignation out of my voice. "Brent, you know my performance has been exemplary. I've never had a negative review. That was before you demonstrated an inability to work collaboratively with management," he said smoothly. "Your refusal to work with me on this project shows a concerning lack of team spirit." I stared at him, finally seeing him clearly for what he was. This wasn't about performance or team spirit. This was about eliminating anyone who might stand in the way of his fraudulent scheme. "You're firing me because I won't commit fraud for you." Brent leaned back in his chair, his composure never wavering. "I'm firing you because you're too naive for the real business world. Maybe accounting isn't for you, Natalie. Perhaps you should consider a career in education or nonprofit work, where your rigid moral standards might be more appreciated." The condescension in his voice was overwhelming, but it also crystallized something inside me. I wasn't just being fired. I was being dismissed as irrelevant, naive, and incompetent. After 6 years of dedicated service, he was treating me like a child who didn't understand how the adult world worked. "I'll need you to clean out your desk and return your access card by the end of the day," he continued, consulting his watch as if my termination was just another appointment in his busy schedule. "Victoria will escort you to your workspace and observe while you pack your personal items." I signed the termination papers because I had no choice, but as I wrote my name, I felt something shift inside me. Brent thought he was getting rid of a problem, but he had no idea what he had just unleashed. "One more thing," he said as I stood to leave. "You signed a non-disclosure agreement when you started here. I trust you remember the terms regarding confidential company information." The threat was clear, even wrapped in legal language. He was warning me to keep quiet about what I had seen and heard. I nodded silently, not trusting myself to speak without revealing the fury building inside me. As Victoria appeared at the door to escort me out, I took one last look at Brent. He had already turned his attention to his computer screen, dismissing me as if I had never existed. He thought this was over, but he was wrong. He had no idea that his worst nightmare was just beginning. The walk from Brent's office to my cubicle felt like a funeral march. Victoria walked beside me, her clipboard in hand and her expression carefully neutral. I could feel the eyes of my colleagues following us, but no one spoke. The entire floor seemed to hold its breath as news of my termination spread through the office grapevine. My cubicle looked exactly as I had left it on Friday. Family photos, my favorite coffee mug with the Colorado flag on it, the small succulent plant that had somehow survived 3 years of office fluorescent lighting. These personal touches that had made the space mine for 6 years now felt like artifacts from someone else's life. "You have 1 hour to pack your personal belongings," Victoria said, consulting her clipboard. "I'm required to observe to ensure no company property is taken." I nodded and began gathering my things, my mind racing even as my hands worked automatically. The encrypted files I had copied over the weekend were safely stored at home, but I needed to be careful not to give any indication that I had taken anything from the office. Victoria watched me with the intensity of a security guard, making notes on her clipboard about everything I put in the cardboard box. As I packed my desk drawer, I found the business card that Janet Rodriguez, a reporter from the Denver Business Journal, had given me 6 months ago. She had been writing an article about women in renewable energy finance and had interviewed several of us at Glenforge Innovations. At the time, I had been proud to represent the company in a positive light. Now, that business card felt like a lifeline. "Personal effects only," Victoria reminded me as I hesitated over a stack of industry publications. "Those belong to the company." "Of course," I said, slipping Janet's business card into my pocket, while Victoria was distracted by someone asking her a question. The move was subtle, natural, and completely unnoticed. My colleague Jessica appeared at my cubicle as I was packing the last of my personal items. She had started at Glenforge Innovations the same week as me 6 years ago, and we had become close friends. Her face was pale with shock and concern. "Natalie, what happened?" she whispered, glancing nervously at Victoria. "Everyone's saying you were fired, but that can't be right." I looked at her for a long moment, wanting desperately to tell her the truth, but knowing I couldn't. Not here, not with Victoria watching and listening to every word. "I disagreed with management about some accounting practices," I said carefully. "It seems they felt my position was no longer sustainable." Jessica's eyes widened with understanding. She was an accountant too, and she knew exactly what kind of disagreements could lead to sudden termination. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "This isn't right." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. It was comforting to know that at least one person saw through the company's narrative about performance issues. As I carried my box toward the elevator, I passed the conference room where the quarterly review meeting was scheduled for Thursday. Through the glass walls, I could see the presentation materials already set up, ready for Brent to present his falsified numbers to the board and potential investors. The sight made my stomach turn, but it also strengthened my resolve. By the time I reached the parking garage, I had made my decision. Brent thought he had silenced me with threats about non-disclosure agreements and professional reputation. He thought I would slink away quietly, grateful to avoid a public scandal. But he had underestimated me completely. As I drove home through the Denver traffic, I was already planning my next move. That evening, I sat in my apartment with the encrypted files spread across my laptop screen and Janet Rodriguez's business card in my hand. The weight of what I was about to do settled on my shoulders like a heavy blanket, but I knew there was no turning back. Brent had made his choice when he decided to fire me rather than abandon his fraudulent scheme. Now I would make mine. I called Janet's number, and she answered on the second ring. Denver Business Journal, Janet Rodriguez speaking. "Hi, Janet. This is Natalie Serrano. We met about 6 months ago when you interviewed me for your article about women in renewable energy finance." "Of course I remember you," Janet said, her voice warming with recognition. "You work at Glenforge Innovations. How are you?" "Actually, I worked at Glenforge Innovations. I was terminated today." I took a deep breath. "Janet, I have a story that I think you should hear. It involves financial fraud, investor deception, and a company that's about to betray everything it claims to stand for." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Those are serious allegations, Natalie. Are you sure you want to go on the record with something like this?" "I'm sure," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. "But I need to know that you'll investigate this thoroughly. I have documentation, but I want to make sure this story is bulletproof before it goes public." Janet's journalist instincts kicked in immediately. "Can you meet me tomorrow morning? There's a coffee shop called Highlands Coffee on 32nd Avenue. I can be there at 8 a.m. "I'll be there," I said. "And Janet, bring a photographer. I have a feeling this is going to be bigger than just one company's financial irregularities." After hanging up with Janet, I spent the rest of the evening organizing my evidence. The encrypted files contained everything Brent thought he had hidden. The real quarterly numbers, his emails discussing the need to massage the data, and most damning of all, a recorded voicemail he had left for his assistant discussing the Peterson Capital meeting and how the adjusted numbers would guarantee the investment. But as I reviewed the evidence, I realized that going to the press wasn't enough. Financial fraud was a federal crime, and if Brent was willing to fire me to hide his activities, he would probably try to destroy evidence and intimidate other employees once my story went public. I needed to involve law enforcement before he had a chance to cover his tracks. I researched the Securities and Exchange Commission's whistleblower program and found their online reporting portal. The process was more straightforward than I had expected, but the weight of what I was doing made my hands shake as I typed my report. This wasn't just about revenge or justice. I was potentially destroying careers, ending relationships, and exposing criminal activity that could send people to prison. But then I thought about the Peterson Capital investors, who would make decisions based on false information. I thought about the employees who might lose their jobs when the fraud eventually came to light anyway. I thought about my father's words about reputation and integrity. By midnight, I had submitted a detailed report to the SEC, complete with all the documentation I had gathered. The automated response told me that an investigator would review my submission and contact me within 72 hours. I fell asleep that night with my laptop still open, the screen glowing in the darkness like a beacon of hope. Brent thought Monday's confrontation had ended with his victory. He had no idea that it was just the beginning of his downfall. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made Denver feel alive with possibility. I met Janet Rodriguez at Highlands Coffee exactly at 8 a.m., carrying a folder that would change everything. The coffee shop was busy with the morning rush, but Janet had secured a corner table where we could talk privately. "Before we start," Janet said, setting up her digital recorder, "I want you to know that I've already done some preliminary research on Glenforge Innovations. There have been rumors in the industry about aggressive accounting practices, but nothing concrete enough to report." I slid the folder across the table to her. "Here's your concrete evidence." For the next 2 hours, I walked Janet through every document, every email, every piece of evidence that showed Brent's fraudulent scheme. Her expression grew more serious with each revelation, and I could see the journalist in her calculating the scope and impact of the story. "This is incredible," she said finally, looking up from the documents. "Natalie, you realize this could bring down the entire company? And probably several careers along with it?" "I realize that," I said quietly. "But what's the alternative? Let them defraud investors and continue operating on false pretenses? How many more people will get hurt if this continues?" Janet nodded, her respect for me evident in her expression. "You're right, of course. This story needs to be told." She paused, studying my face. "But I have to ask, are you prepared for the backlash? Brent Douglas isn't going to take this quietly, and he has resources to fight back." I thought about my father's words, about integrity and reputation. "I'm prepared," I said. "The truth needs to come out, whatever the consequences." Janet smiled and extended her hand. "Then let's make sure the truth gets told properly. I'll have this story ready for tomorrow's edition." Wednesday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The Denver Business Journal had published Janet's article online at 6 a.m., and by 7 a.m., it was trending on social media. The headline read, "Glenforge Innovations CFO accused of investor fraud in whistleblower report." My phone rang again. It was Agent Patricia Wong from the SEC. "Miss Serrano, I'm calling about your whistleblower report. We've reviewed your evidence and we're opening a formal investigation. Can you meet with me this afternoon?" "Of course," I said, my heart racing with a mixture of fear and vindication. "There's something else," Agent Wong continued. "Based on the severity of your allegations and the strength of your documentation, we're coordinating with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They'll be executing search warrants at Glenforge Innovations this morning." I nearly dropped my phone. "This morning?" "In about 2 hours," she said. "I wanted to give you advance notice because there's going to be significant media attention. Are you prepared for that?" Before I could answer, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see news vans already gathering on my street. The story was bigger than even Janet had predicted. By 9 a.m., federal agents had descended on Glenforge Innovations. I watched the live coverage from my living room, seeing my former colleagues standing in confusion as FBI agents carried boxes of evidence out of the building. The cameras captured Brent being escorted from his office, his face pale, and his hands visibly shaking. The reporter on scene announced that the company's stock had been suspended from trading and that criminal charges were expected to be filed within days. Peterson Capital had already issued a statement withdrawing their investment offer and expressing their commitment to ethical business practices. It was over. Brent's carefully constructed fraud had collapsed in less than 72 hours. As I watched Brent's empire crumble on live television, I realized that justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about protecting others from the harm he would have caused. My father would have been proud. I had protected my reputation by refusing to compromise my integrity. And in doing so, I had probably saved countless investors from financial devastation. The road ahead would be challenging, with legal proceedings and career rebuilding to consider. But I had learned that sometimes the most difficult choice is also the most necessary one. Sometimes the only way forward is to burn down the very thing that's destroying you from within.